This prayer is said 3 times. I pay homage to the Gautama who, moved by his compassion, taught the holy sacred Dharma to rid us of distorted views. So yesterday I gave quite a detailed introduction, so I will not repeat that. And we are going through the guide of the Bodhisattva's way of life. Verse number 8, end of verse number 8. And verse number 9, the moment an awakening mind arises in those fettered and weak in jail of cyclic existence, they will be named a son of Sugadasa and will be revered by both men and gods of the world. And the next verse also. So verse number 12, and so when we do practices like going around temples and doing prostrations and doing purification practices, as well as reciting mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum mantra, like even once with under the influence of bodhicitta, without being tinged with the worldly concerns such as having long life, wealth, becoming rich, and gaining name and fame. Because doing so, whenever you achieve the goal, that's the end of the ripened effect of those prayers when it's done with that kind of mundane motivation. Whereas if you by seeing the indispensability of achieving Buddhahood, omniscience, and with that understanding, if you also dedicate whatever merit you may have collected through your practices for attaining higher rebirth within the perspective of reaching the goal of reaching enlightenment, then the merit, the effect of that merit will be infinite. And so otherwise, just thinking of attaining higher rebirth alone, with that motivation alone, and also for this life, pleasure of this life, such as name, fame, and wealth, and so forth, the effect is just limited to that. And then when you dedicate your virtuous practices to reach liberation alone, and when you reach that goal, that's the end of the effect of your prayer. Whereas if you dedicate your prayers, your practices for the ultimate enlightenment of Buddhahood, omniscient state of Buddhahood, and with the courage and the determination to work for infinite number of sentient beings, for infinite number of infinite duration of time, and so forth, then the result or the effect of that will never end. It will be endless until the end of space. It's said that that merit will have that kind of effect. So therefore it says, all other virtues are like the plantain tree, for after bearing fruit they simply perish. But the perennial tree of the awakening mind unceasingly bears fruit and thereby flourishes without end. Verse number 12. So when you say the prayers like taking refuge and the bodhicitta, generating bodhicitta, and with that kind of attitude of reaching a Buddhahood, then your merit will never wear out. Verse number 13, like entrusting myself to a brave man when greatly afraid. By entrusting myself to this awakening mind, I shall swiftly liberate it, and so on until verse number end of verse number 14. As the leaders of the different religious traditions just spoke earlier, the practice of love and compassion is the essence of all the religious traditions, essential message of all the religious traditions, and therefore for a dharma to become a true dharma practice for us and turn into a dharma practice, and when you really do your practice with a genuine sense of concern for others, with love and compassion, it will be truly a practice of dharma. Otherwise, with the ulterior motives, they will not be a dharma practice. So the dharma practice is for our happiness. In short, by practicing the religion or spirituality or dharma, we need to be able to become happy. Those whose aim is mere material gain, material development, they try to find satisfaction and gratification through sensorial experiences. But we, as Dharma practitioners, we should not be contented with that alone, but we need to really integrate the teaching within ourselves and develop faith and so forth. And so earlier, one of the speakers was a Jain practitioner, and the one who was wearing a white, totally white robe. So Jainism doesn't believe in a creator God, and also Sankhyaism does not believe in, there's one part of Sankhyaism does not believe in creator God. And so what they believe in is, including Buddhism, what they believe in is that things come through on the basis of their causes and conditions. So law of causality is what they accept. So mainly on the basis of your bodily action and speech, action of your speech, whether they become positive or negative is dependent on your motivation, which is to do with your mind. And therefore, it is the most important thing for us is to train our mind and to so whether you want to practice some religion or not is up to the individuals. So if you wish to stay a non-believer without having any belief in any kind of a teaching of Buddhism, particularly here, if you actually want to be Buddhist, then you should be sincere in your practice of the teaching. So we do not have to talk about future lives yet, but even in this life, you'll have benefit. So its unfathomable advantages were taught to the disciple Sudhana by the wise Lord Maitreya. So the special resolve generated by the great compassion, and that in turn the great resolve also engendering bodhicitta. And so by generating bodhicitta and then thinking of engaging in the bodhisattva practices, and that bodhicitta is that of the engaging bodhicitta. And so we have, in brief, the verse number 15, awakening mind should be understood to be two types: the mind that aspires to awaken and the mind that ventures to do so. As is understood by the distinction between aspiring to go and actually going, so the wise understands in turn the distinction between the two. And so just as you aspire to enlightenment, that of omniscient state, accordingly, by making pledge that you will engage in the bodhisattva practices, then it says, although great fruits occur in cyclic existence from the mind that aspires to awaken, an uninterrupted flow of merit does not ensue, as it does with the venturing mind. For with him who has perfectly seized the mind with with the thought never to turn away from totally liberating the infinite ocean forms of life. From that time hence, even while asleep or unconcerned, a force of merit equal to the sky will perpetually ensue. So verse number 22 shows how difficult and how rare it is for, as it says, then what need is there to mention the wish to dispel this inconceivable misery? And verse number 13 and so forth. And then verse number 23 gives the reason why it's rare. So if you show love and kindness to others, even birds and dogs and other cats and so forth also appreciate this. Not only human beings. And this gives them joy and happiness in their mind. So half jokingly, but half seriously, I would say that when there's no danger or risk of catching malaria, I would sometimes give volunteer to give blood to mosquitoes, and it sucks my blood and its body becomes all red, and then they leave some kind of a bubble behind on my arm, and then fly away. And so the mosquito doesn't seem to have the sense of appreciation after having sucked blood. I mean, whereas the animals like cats and dogs do have the sense of appreciation of our kindness. So I asked my friends up to what stage of brain development or the size of brain could one actually explain that this is the stage when someone can actually show appreciation. But so far I have not got any response. But basically, when you show love and kindness and affection to others, others also respond positively, reciprocate. So how can I fathom the depths of the goodness of this jewel of mind? So when someone is in sorrow, and if you can actually try to soothe them, they also will appreciate your kindness. And some scientists have done some experiment on rats, 2 rats, which were both injured, have injuries on their body. And one rat was kept in with some company, other rats, and others, the second one was left alone. And the one with company, the one without the friends or company, the injury of that rat took longer, whereas the one with injury with company, and because of the other companies, rats accompanying it, licking on its injury healed faster. And so, when there is a company who is actually showing affection and kindness to the injured rat, then they don't remain isolated and depressed and sad and full of sorrow. And therefore, because of that, getting help from the other rats, its injury healed faster. So the panacea that relieves the world of pain and is the source of all joy. Verse number 27 also done. If merely a benevolent intention excels in venerating the Buddhas, then what needs to mention striving to make all beings without exception happy. And so all sentient beings are like oneself, not wanting suffering and wanting happiness. So each and every individual may be striving to achieve their strive for their happiness and overcome their suffering. Why do I need to work? If you ask this question, then the answer is this verse number 28. Although wishing to be rid of misery, they run towards misery. Although wishing to have happiness, like an enemy, they ignorantly destroy it. And so no one wants suffering, but happiness. But if you try to deceive others, bully others, and actually try to, through these means, try to gain happiness, sometimes people who do such things are considered more effective, efficient in life. People do consider them like that. So those beings who have no understanding of the faults of our negative, destructive emotions, they are passionate about greed, attachment, anger, and so forth. But they are never in peace and at ease within themselves. So never. So though they wishing to be happy, they run towards misery. Though wishing to have happiness, they ignorantly destroy it like an enemy. So love, compassion, contentment, patience, and so forth give us more happiness. You are you are at ease without much fear, anxiety, and so forth. But people are not so paying much attention to this, not interested in these positive principles and practices. So therefore, people are really not working towards the development and cultivation of love and compassion. Even people who follow religions, they are not so interested. They don't really pursue cultivation of love and compassion. And therefore, they do the opposite thing. And therefore, it is really true to say that although they wish happiness like an enemy, they ignorantly destroy it. For those who are deprived of happiness and burdened with many sorrows, verse number 29, it satisfies them with all joys, dispels all suffering, and clears away confusion. Where is there a comparable virtue? Where is there even a friend? Where is there merit similar to this? If whoever repays a kind deed is worthy of some praise, then what need to mention the bodhisattvas who do good without its being asked of him? And so forth. And in the letter to a friend and so forth, it mentions that when we give to others, we should give them with respect. Sometimes people give alms to beggars and to poor people, as if with an attitude like whereby they actually look down upon them. That's not how we should. And so as Bodhisattva practitioners, we need to really pay respect, even when we give something to some beggars or so. And then in the 8 verses of training the mind, it says, whenever I accompany with others, whenever I associate with others, may I look upon myself as the lowest and hold the others dear and higher. And then it says, those who are evil or by nature, and they are tormented by suffering and diseases, and may I hold them as if finding a cherished treasure. So in the Ratnavali, Master Nagarjuna mentioned 16 practices for higher rebirth, such as the 10 virtuous actions, and on top of that, giving offerings with respect and making offerings to those of the worthy of offering and so forth. So verse number 34, 35, and 36. So we have reached the end of chapter 1. As Master Nagarjuna, as Shantideva says, may I be sustenance to the multitude of beings, like those of the elements such as earth and so forth. And then Nagarjuna's prayer in Ratnavali also mentions, may I be an immeasurable kind of source of enjoyment, objects of enjoyment, like those of the fire and so forth. So even if someone becomes connected with you through some negative means, such as through anger and becoming your enemy and so forth, and it says in this text, I bow down to the body of him in whom the sacred precious mind is born, and I seek refuge in that source of joy who brings to happiness even those who harm him. And so the example of this kind of practice is the Buddha himself in the Jataka tales as one king named Maitri Bhala, who was said to have offered his body to some cannibals. And then the next chapter goes through the 7-limb practice in order to say that precious mind I offer now to Tathagatas, to the sacred Dharma and seen as jewel, and to the sons of Buddha, the oceans of excellence, whatever flowers, fruits there are, and whatever kind of medicine, whatever jewels exist in this world, and whatever clean, refreshing waters. Likewise, gems encrusted mountains, forest groves, quiet and joyful places, heavenly trees bedecked with flowers, and trees with fruit-laden branches, fragrances of celestial realms, incense, wishing trees, and jewel trees, uncultivated harvests, and all ornaments that are worthy to be offered. And so this chapter goes through the preliminary practices for the cultivation of bodhicitta, or before embracing bodhicitta. So of course, we can make offering of your body, but then, verse number 5 and 6 of second chapter. So you are actually saying that you are going to be servants of all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and which means that you are going to serve whatever they wish for sentient beings. So creating these things in my mind, I offer them to the Supreme Beings, the Buddha, as well as their sons, compassionate ones. Think kindly of me and accept these offerings of mine. Having no merit, I am destitute, and I have no other gifts to offer. Protectors, you who think of helping others by your power, accept these for my sake. Eternally shall I offer all my bodies to the conquerors and their sons. Please accept me, your supreme heroes. You supreme heroes, respectfully shall I be your subject. And then regarding the 7-limb practice, it has to do with some Indian custom. So we make offerings of the drinking water and so forth, the incense, flower and so forth. I mean, the water for washing one's feet and so forth. I mean, these are according to Indian customs. And when you visit some temples, the Indian sadhus do that to you as well. And then there's also the offering of perfume and offering of food and so forth. So through being completely under your care, I shall benefit all with no fears of conditioned existence. I shall perfectly transcend my previous evils, and in the future shall commit no more. To very sweetly scented bathing chambers with brilliant sparkling crystal floors and exquisite pillars ablaze with gems, having canopies above aglow with pearls. I beseech the Tathagatas and their sons to come and bathe their bodies from many jeweled vases filled with water scented and enticing to the accompaniment of music and song. Let me dry their body with incomparable clothes, clean and wet, well anointed with scent, and then may I present these holy beings with fragrant garments of suitable colors. I had adorned with manifold ornaments and various raiments. Fine and smooth, the Arya Samandabhadra, Manjughosha, Avalokiteshvara, and to all the others, just like polishing pure, refined gold, do I anoint the Buddha's forms that blaze with light with the choicest perfumes, whose fragrance permeates 1,000 million worlds. And to the highest objects of giving, I offer beautiful, well-arranged garlands as well as enchanting, sweet-smelling flowers such as lilies, jasmine, and lotus blossom blooms. Also, I send forth clouds of incense, whose sweet aroma steals away the mind, as well as celestial delicacies, including a variety of food and drinks. So, as part of taking refuge, it also goes through that of confession. So because when you do confession, it needs the four powers, and one of them is the power of reliance or power of support, and that is fulfilled by the objects of refuge and practicing that of refuge.
Lama
So in order for our confession to work effectively, you need to actually see the negative, the disadvantage or the faults of our negative actions. And mainly you need to think about the conditioned existential pervasive suffering of the three types of suffering. The suffering of suffering, the painful experiences, obvious painful experiences, and then the suffering of change, and which are actually, regarding the suffering of suffering, it is even recognized as being unwanted by the suffering or pain by animals as well. So we are on verse number 32. Verse number 31 done, and 32 on page 19. Oh, Mari. 32. So, we are on verse number 37. When we think about the suffering of lower realms of existence, we sometimes have this notion, though it's quite far away from me. But today we are alive, though we are alive. Tomorrow, perhaps, we may be dead, and people may say, oh, this person was alive yesterday and today he's gone. Therefore, you cannot say you will not die 100% with the surety. Maybe about 90% you can say. 70 or 8, some percent, you may say, I may not die, but you cannot say I will not die 100%. Therefore, even within verse number 37, so verse number 34, sorry, leaving all, I must depart alone, but through not having understood this and so forth, and then the next verse. So we usually try to considering others as one's enemies and adversaries, try to cause harm either directly or indirectly. And whereas with regard to our relatives, near and dear ones, we actually see even the faults of our relatives, near and dear ones, as something positive, and even the good qualities of our so-called enemies as something negative. And therefore, the text says, I committed various kinds of evils for the sake of my friends and foes. My foes will become nothing. My friends will become nothing. I too will become nothing. Likewise, all will become nothing. Just like a dream experience, whatever things I enjoy will become a memory. Whatever has passed will not be seen again. And verse number 39. Verse number 40. So death is inevitable, but you are not sure when you are going to die. And therefore, if you could leave an imprint on the subtle mind of a positive energy, positive karma, then that imprint, I mean, of course, after you have experienced the clear light at the time of death, just before departing from this body, and you go through the bardo, the intermediate state between this life and the next life, that imprint will be carried on that subtle mind, and not the body, not the sensorial perceptions. And therefore, for the next life, the wealth and the riches of this life will not help. So even if you may be very rich with billions and trillions of dollars, at the time of death, none of this will help. And if you may be very popular and famous, that will help you nothing. And nothing can help you at the time of death. So in order to leave imprint on the subtle mind, we could actually leave that imprint on this more gross mind, and then that imprint can go to the subtle mind. And in the Madhyamaka Prasangika school of thought, they talk about the disintegration, this so-called shikpa, or disintegratedness of our karmas. And the disintegration of something, if that disintegration of something comes because of its cause, and therefore the disintegratedness of your karma or your action should be a product that has come through causes and conditions and not a permanent thing. So verse number 42, it says, the verse number 41 says, my merit alone will protect me then, but upon that I have never relied. O protector, I, so unconcerned, unaware of such terror as this, accumulated a great deal of evil for the sake of this transient life. Petrified is the person today being led to a torture chamber with dry mouth and dreadful sunken eyes. His entire appearance is transfigured. What need to mention the tremendous despair when stricken with the disease of great panic, being clasped by the physical forms of the frightful messengers of death. Who can afford me real protection from this great horror? With terrified, bulging eyes agape, I shall research the four quarters for refuge. Verse number 46 and 47, 48, done, 49. Verse number 54. So the suffering is the result of our negative emotions, and the negative emotions are within our mind, and therefore what we need to understand is the workings of our mind and emotions. And so these negative emotions are those which no sooner they arise in our mind, disturb the equilibrium of our mind, the peace of mind, and that is called negative emotion, according to the Abhidharma text. As we talked about yesterday, we talked about the subtle and the coarse levels of levels of mind. So in the religious traditions of Indian traditions, there is talk of negative emotions, and particularly in the teaching of the Buddha, in both Pali and the Sanskrit traditions, there is great deal of explanation of the negative emotions. Verse number 54, it says, "Then how much more so, perpetually diseased by the manifold evils of desire," and so forth. And the next two lines also. And so today we have lots of suffering, misery, because of people, bombardment in various places, and killing one another, killing other human beings. It has almost become like a nature today for people to kill one another. But naturally, within ourselves, we have the wish for peace and happiness. Last year or so, one American, the Institute of Peace, the U.S. Institute of Peace, organized a meeting of peace builders, youth peace builders, who came to see me. And so when these youth peace builders talked about their experiences, how they actually came to, felt inspired to start their peace building effort, they told stories where they witnessed their friends suffering through bombardment and killing. And right at that moment, they had this thought and the motivation to work for peace in the world. And they felt that it's indispensable, that they cannot stay aloof or indifferent to such a situation. So when they told this kind of story, I really felt inspired by them. So usually when such things happen to people, it's quite difficult for us to really have that kind of determination right at the spot where the bombs cracked. And so I felt quite inspired by these stories. And so I told them, these youth peace builders, don't feel alone, that you are alone in this effort. Because naturally, there are people who have the natural tendency to work and to think for peace and happiness in this world. And therefore, you should not think that you are alone in this effort, I told them. And then I also told them that you should gather in your places, gather other people who are working, who are doing the same kind of work, and then discuss amongst yourself to how to spread the message and the actions that you actually carry out. So I told them this. Verse number 54 again, if I need to comply with the doctor's advice when frightened by a common illness, then how much more so when perpetually diseased by the manifold evils of desire and so forth. Of course, we were not born as killers and those creating harm towards others. But because of the environment that we grew up in, what happens is the children whose minds are so pure in the beginning becomes influenced by the environment. And therefore, we can actually, it's possible for us to change this within our youth. And of course, educational system, the existing modern education system itself is not inadequate. And therefore, we are thinking of introducing this teaching of love and compassion and creating a curriculum which is almost, the draft is done, and perhaps this year it will be distributed. And if all people dwelling on this earth can be overcome by just one of these, and if no other medicine to cure them is to be found elsewhere in the universe, verse number 54 done, and then 55 done, 56, then the intention not to act in accordance with the advice of all-knowing physicians that can uproot every misery is extremely bewildered and worthy of scorn. If I need to be careful near a small ordinary precipice, then how much more so near the one of long duration that drops from 1,000 miles. It is inappropriate to enjoy myself thinking that today alone I shall not die, for inevitably the time will come when I shall become nothing. Who can grant me fearlessness? How can I be surely freed from this? If I shall inevitably become nothing, how can I relax and enjoy myself? Verse number 60, 61, 62, 63, done, and 64 done, and then 65 shows that you feel regret for, by seeing the faults of negative actions, you regret your having committed negative actions, and then confess it. I beseech all the guides of the world to please accept my evils and wrongs. Since there is no good in future, I shall do them no more. And then we have tea. This is the blessing for the tea. Chapter 3, next. So we go through the rejoicing and then requesting the Buddha's return, the wheel of Dharma, and then you embrace the bodhicitta, the spirit of enlightenment, and then feel joy for having embraced it. So gladly, the verse number 1, gladly do I rejoice in the virtue that relieves the misery of all those in unfortunate states and that places those with suffering in happiness. I rejoice in that gathering of virtue that is the cause for the Arhat's awakening. I rejoice in the definite freedom of embodied creatures from the misery of cyclic existence. I rejoice in the awakening of the Buddhas and also in the spiritual levels of dear sons. And with gladness I rejoice in the oceans of virtue from developing an awakening mind that wishes all beings to be happy, as well as in the deeds that bring them benefit. With folded hands I beseech the Buddhas of all directions to shine the lamp of Dharma for all bewildered in misery's gloom. With folded hands I beseech the conquerors who wish to pass away to please remain for countless eons and not to leave the world in darkness. Thus, by the virtue collected through all that I have done, may the pain of every living creature be completely cleared away. May I be the doctor and medicine, and may I be the nurse for the sick beings in the world until everyone is healed. May a rain of food and drink descend to clear away the pains of thirst and hunger, and during the eons of famine may I myself change into food and become food and drink. May I become an inexhaustible treasure for those who are poor and destitute. May I turn into all things they could need, and may these be placed close beside them. Without any sense of loss, I shall give my body and enjoyment as well as all my virtues and... So with regard to verse number 16 in this third chapter, so the word for faith here, Gotun Kunalama Rinpoche should be non-virtuous. So it says, if in those who encounter me, angry or unvirtuous mind thoughts arise, may they eternally become the source for fulfilling all their wishes. Verse number 22, the end of verse number 22. Up to this, the seven limb practice is finished, and then comes the embracing of bodhicitta. So the verse number 23 and 24 are for embracing or bodhicitta, generating bodhicitta, the actual bodhicitta, the actual practice of generating bodhicitta. In order, then verse number 25. In order to further increase it, from now on, those with discernment who have lucidly seized and awakened mind in this way should highly praise it in the following manner, and so forth. And so then rejoicing in having rejoiced, and so having thought about bodhicitta and generated bodhicitta, and also with the help of, by complementing it with the wisdom of emptiness, by that also by seeing that the negative emotions are faulty and that they have antidotes, and therefore there is end to the negative emotions, and therefore you find that the suffering can be ended. And therefore, when that happens, when you find yourself and others to be overcome with suffering, you will work for overcoming the suffering by seeing that it can be ended. And you can also work to help others to end suffering and have the determination to work for them as well. And so it says, thus, whatever actions I do from now on must be in accord with the family. Never shall I disgrace or pollute this noble and unsullied race. And then just like a blind man discovering, verse number 28, discovering the jewel in a heap of rubbish, likewise, by some coincidence, an awakening mind has been born within me. So someone who is full of suffering, because of having the conditions, external conditions like meeting with your spiritual master, and also that internally you have the seed for enlightenment. So by seeing that the negative emotions are something that actually make you feel repulsive, as if you feel repulsion towards them. And so by dedicating ourselves to the cultivation of bodhicitta and working for others is what we are aspiring here to do. And therefore it says, likewise by some coincidence, an awakening mind has been born within me. And of course, you cannot help yourself by with anger, and while being angry to do some practice for long life will not help. And so, if you wish to live long, you need to practice bodhicitta. And therefore, it is the supreme ambrosia that overcomes the sovereignty of death. It is the inexhaustible treasure that eliminates all poverty in the world. So although your goal is not to gain name, fame, wealth, and so forth, but they come as a byproduct through the practice of bodhicitta. It is the supreme medicine that quells the world's disease. It is the tree that shelters all beings, wandering and tired on the path of conditioned existence. And it is the universal bridge that leads to freedom from unhappy states of birth. Of course, right, just by having the experience of bodhicitta, you will not come to the end of negative emotions, but only after reaching the path which is referred by Parasamgati, and you will be able to end that of negative emotions, not merely by the path of accumulation, by reaching the path of accumulation, or the path of preparation and path of seeing, because path of seeing also partially eliminates negative emotions and not the whole. And therefore, in the path of meditation, you'll be able to overcome that of the negative emotions. So although we have this kind of body, which is the result of our negative, our karma and delusions, but with bodhicitta, you will have an experience as if you are in nirvana. Therefore, it says, it is like the shelter tree that shelters all beings, wandering in the tired and path, wandering and tired on the path of conditioned existence. It is the universal bridge that leads to freedom from unhappy states of birth. It is the dawning moon of mind that dispels. So this that dispels the torment of disturbing emotions. And so here the disturbing emotions are mentioned. And then the next verse, which says, it is the great sun that finally removes the misty ignorance of the world. So misty ignorance here refers to that of the cognitive obscuration or obscuration of knowledge. And with the wisdom of emptiness, therefore, which is supported by, backed by bodhicitta, can end the obscuration to knowledge. So, in the Tantra, you need to use according to Tantra, you need to use the subtlest clear-light mind, which is used to realize emptiness, and thereby, with the help of that kind of clear-light mind, with meditating on emptiness, you'll be able to overcome the subtlest cognitive obscuration after having overcome what are known as the three visions. So all the teachings of the Buddha are meant, directly or indirectly, to lead us to the realization of the suchness or reality as it is. And therefore, the understanding of impermanence and suffering actually approaches or leads us to that emptiness, and then the rough understanding or the coarser understanding of selflessness actually approaches it, and then we have the final realization of emptiness itself. So verse number 34 done. So end of the third chapter done. So when we think about this, where it says, may gods, anti-gods, and all be joyful. So regarding this line, the mention of gods and non-gods and so forth, when I give some long life offering, where there is within this ritual, please bring that lifespan that you have actually snatched away from me back to me and so forth. This is not quite right, I feel. I mean, we should, in fact, as practitioners of bodhicitta, we should be able to feel glad that even if they kind of take away our lifespan or snatch away our lifespan and so forth, I mean, let them do so. So when I was doing this long life ceremony, I mean long life initiation in Ladakh, and when I come across this kind of statement, I felt that, I mean, I rather felt uneasy to say that, I mean, do not snatch away my lifespan and so forth. So we do this prayer where we say, may all the negativities of others ripen upon me, and may I be able to give all my virtues to the others. So if you actually be altruistic, open to others, care more about others. I mean, even if there are spirits who have kind of snatched away your lifespan and so, but they might come back and actually return your lifespan, and gladly. So it says, the verse number 34 says, today in the presence of all the protectors, I will invite all the worlds to be my guests, which means guests for the attainment, guests to whom you will lead to the state of omniscience. So having met that pledge to work for all sentient beings, therefore it's at the festival of the temporary and ultimate delight, may gods and anti-gods and all be joyful. So it's very difficult if you are full of self-cherishing attitude and also holding on to this, grasping at some true existence of yourself and doing some prayers for long life and so forth to be effective. And so once in Dharamsala, in Lower Dharamsala, there was an art and craft center, and some people, the people there invited me because they said that there's some kind of a ghost which was actually opening the doors and slamming the doors in the night and when there was nobody and so forth. So of course I said I have nothing to, no rituals that I do. But what I did was I meditated on bodhicitta, the spirit of enlightenment, for a while when I visited the place. And then later I was told that that spirit has gone. So then I felt that my ritual has rather borne its fruit. May gods and anti-gods and all be joyful. So this is the third chapter, which is embracing the bodhicitta. Verse number, chapter 4. Having firmly seized the awakening mind in this way, our conqueror's son must never waver, and so forth. The why? The reason is said in the next verse. In the case of reckless actions or of deeds not well considered, and so forth. So with regard to taking bodhisattva vows, it says, verse number 3 says, but how can I ever withdraw from what has been examined by the great wisdom of the Buddhas and their sons, and even many times by me myself? If, having made such a promise, do I not put it into action, then by deceiving every living being, what kind of rebirth shall I take? And there seems to be a story behind verse number 7. Only the omniscient can discern, related with Shariputra, the manner of action of those who give up the awakening mind but are freed. It is beyond the scope of ordinary thought. This, for a bodhisattva, is the heaviest of downfalls, for should it ever happen, the welfare of all beings will be weakened. And should others, for even a single moment, hinder or obstruct his wholesome deeds by weakening the welfare of all beings, and so forth. So if you could reflect on bodhicitta, so you could actually, if you could meditate on bodhicitta, it would be really helpful. So everyone will actually love you if you could be kind to others. Whereas if you are someone who has quite a bad motivation and evil thought towards others, then people will also be cautious about you, cautious with you. And then with regard to this brain that we have, this marvelous brain that we have, we could actually use it to boost our positive attitudes, this kindness and warm heart. By using this intelligence, we could actually think broadly. This is not something that the animals can do. So having this human intelligence, it's really a great loss if we use it to deceive others, kill others, and harm others. Whereas if we could use it in the service of human beings, and it's worthy, having this kind of human life becomes worthy, and this intelligence also serves its purpose well. So verse number 11 and 12, done. Thus, those who have the force of awakening mind as well as the force of falling from it, stay revolving within cycling and for a long time are hindered in reaching the Bodhisattva levels. Therefore, just as I have promised, shall I respectfully accord my actions. If from now on I make no effort, I shall descend from lower to lower states. Although for the benefit of every creature, countless Buddhas have passed by, yet I was not an object of their care because of my own mistakes. And if I continue to act like this again and again, shall I undergo suffering in unhappy realms, sickness, bondage, laceration, and the shedding of blood? If the rising of a Tathagata faith, the attainment of a human body, and by my being fit to cultivate the virtue are scarce, when will they be won again? Although today I am healthy, well nourished and unafflicted, life is momentary and deceptive. The body is like an object of loan for but a minute. Verse number 17, 18, 19, 20 done. So verse number 28. Although enemies such as hatred and craving have neither any legs or arms and legs, and are neither courageous nor wise, how have I been used like a slave by them? And so these negative emotions such as hatred, craving, jealousy, pride or arrogance, and so forth, they are not like weapons which are physical, but they actually cause ruin to oneself. Therefore, residing within oneself, they actually ruin us. And this is your enemy. The real enemy are those of the negative emotions within you. The ordinary enemies, the so-called enemies, the beings, are transient. The enemy could turn friends, and friends could turn enemies in one's life. Whereas, if you befriend and voluntarily be passionate with that of the negative emotions, they only could harm you and no help will come. For while they dwell within my mind, at their pleasure they cause me harm, yet I patiently endure them without any anger. But this is an inappropriate and shameful time for patience. Should even all the gods and anti-gods rise up against me as my enemies, they could not lead nor place me in the roaring fires of the deepest hell. But the mighty foe, those disturbing conceptions, in a moment can cast me amidst those flames, which can, and so forth. So even though you may have some human enemy, if you could practice patience towards that person without any hurry, even if the person is trying to be bad to you, to harm you or do something bad to you, if you don't retaliate but practice patience and then also And when the time comes to help them rather than harming them, what will happen is, oh, that person will say, oh, that person was someone I totally disliked, but the person himself, I mean, that person is not so bad. And so, and today we have people who are called Muslim terrorists. The so-called terrorists are destroyed by using weapons and so forth, but the body will be destroyed. But the anger, the hatred that is caused in the people's mind cannot be overcome by that weapon, and that persists. So, of course, others also have fear and anxiety. We should work to reduce that gradually, to overcome their anger, fear, and the anxiety and so forth. And so, today, people use the term Muslim terrorists, and that's not really good to say Muslim terrorists. So when people today talk about terrorism, immediately the image that forms in their mind is the Muslim terrorists. And even terrorists are there, even amongst Buddhists. So one time I saw on a Time magazine cover picture where it says the face of a Buddhist terror, showing a Buddhist monk, the Burmese Buddhist monk who was leading the that kind of action. So we should not use the terms Buddhist terrorists or Muslim terrorists or Buddhist terrorists, because terrorists are terrorists. The moment the moment someone indulges in harming others, they are no more followers of those religions. And therefore, terrorists are terrorists, and we should not align terrorism with the religion. Buddhism or Muslim, Islam. So verse number 33 says, if I agree with honor and trust myself to others, they will bring me benefit and happiness. But if I trust myself to the disturbing conceptions in future, they will bring only misery and harm. While in cyclic existence, how can I be joyful and unafraid if in my heart I readily prepare a place for this incessant enemy of long duration, the sole cause for the increase of all that harms me? So by taking refuge in the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, and with regard to this practice of taking refuge, the main practice is taking refuge in the Dharma, which is not a reference to the scriptures, the books, but it's a reference to the true cessation and the true which gives rise to the true path, which gives rise to the true cessation. These two, true cessation and true path, are the actual Dharma jewel, because we need to think about them as in terms of the purification of negativities from our mind, the negative action, the negative emotions, overcoming them. So where we say that we take refuge in the Dharma jewel, if we are overpowered by or under the sway of our negative emotions itself, if we let ourselves be like that, then it's like telling lie. But when you say, even though you may say, I take refuge in the Dharma jewel. So while and how shall I ever have happiness? And in a net of attachment within my mind, the dual guardians of prison of cyclic existence, they disturbing. There comes, they becomes my butchers and tormentors in hell and so forth. Verse number 37. And if while engaged in a violent battle, vigorously desiring to conquer those whose disturbing emotions will naturally bring them suffering at death. So negative emotions are the ones which have caused us ruin since time beginningless and caused us suffering. The three types of suffering, suffering of change, and the conditioned existential pervasive suffering. And therefore, it says in verse number 38, then what need to mention that I should not be faint-hearted and slothful, even if I'm caused many hundreds of sufferings. And so, in order to destroy that real enemy of negative emotions, when now I strive to definitely overcome my natural enemies, which are the constant source of my misery, if even scars inflicted by meaningless enemies are worn upon the body like ornaments, then why is suffering a cause of harm to me, who impeccably strives to fulfill the great purpose? So, in order to fulfill this great purpose of overcoming my negative emotions, I should not feel tired that it's difficult to overcome them when I work to endeavor towards overcoming them. If fishermen, hunters, and farmers, thinking merely of their own livelihood, endure the sufferings of heat and cold, why am I not patient for the sake of the world's joy? When I promise to liberate all those beings dwelling in the 10 directions as far as the ends of space from their disturbing emotions, I myself was not yet freed from mine. And then regarding these negative emotions, so it says in verse number 45 that once you overcome the negative emotions from within your mind stream, they will never come back in your mind. Whereas the other enemy, the external enemy, human enemies and so forth, even if you actually conquer them or defeat them once, they'll gather forces and come back. And so with regard to verse number 46, the deluded, disturbing conceptions. And so this could be interpreted, this line, these two phrases in Tibetan are nyomong, nyomong. And so according to Lama Rinpoche Tenzin Gyaltsen, it's a reading of the Sanskrit. He says that the Bhakkara, the term for Bhakkara, the nyomong, one of the nyomong is Bhakkara and the other is Kalachakra. Although in Tibetan, both of these words, Bhakkara and Kalachakras, are translated as nyomong, and so the Bhakkara has that meaning of being feeble, so feeble, disturbing emotions. Which means that it can be overcome without any weapons but the wisdom of emptiness. For when forsaken by the eyes of wisdom and dispelled from my mind, where will you go? Where will you dwell in order to be able to enjoy me again? But weak-minded, I have been reduced to making no effort. So verse number 47 also, the last line says, for no real reason why should I suffer so much in hell. So here the analytical meditation of searching for who I am is mentioned. As Mulamadhyamaka Karika of Nagarjuna says that the elimination of the karma and delusions is liberation. There's liberation, and karma and delusions come from mental construction or exaggerated or inappropriate mentation, and this can be ended. This arises from our fabrication and reification, and which can be ended by emptiness. And Master Nagarjuna says that something because of our inappropriate mentation, exaggerated way of looking at things, we have attachment towards things that look attractive, and then those which look unattractive or repulsive, we become angry. So this is something we must know. This really helped me. As I explained yesterday also, on the ground of this inappropriate mentation, we become attached or angry. So because of this grasping at some true independent existence in things, which is this reification, we actually become attracted to have this exaggerated outlook on things that look attractive, and we become angry at those which we perceive as repulsive. But if you, because of that, we become attached. We have attachment and the anger. But if you could think that things do not exist the way they appear to me, the appearance is that of an objectively, independently existence. Whereas if you could actually think through and say that, oh, this is not the way things are, then that really helps to counter your attachment and anger and also the other negative emotions. And so these lines from the Mula Madhyamaka Karika by Nagarjuna really helped me. So therefore, it says, verse number 47, if these disturbing emotions do not exist within the object, the sense organs, between the two, nor elsewhere, then where do they exist, and how do they harm the world? So because of our inappropriate thinking about the things that look attractive and unattractive, we become attached. Attachment and anger arise in us. And therefore, if you could actually see that things do not have any ground of having this kind of true independent existence, that kind of attachment also will be overcome. They are like an illusion. So negative emotions included, and everything that appears. If you could confirm from your understanding that they do not exist the way they appear to you, that they do not have existence or the true or independent existence, then that will help to counter your negative emotions. Whereas love and compassion are not rooted in this kind of inappropriate thinking. By thinking about suffering of others and wanting them to be free from suffering and wanting them to have happiness, then our emotions of love and compassion grows. Whereas attachment, and therefore this has a support of our valid knowledge, good knowledge, whereas anger and attachment do not have that kind of support because they are backed, or they actually arise there and then arise through this inappropriate fantasizing. And therefore, it says, thus I should dispel the fear within my heart and strive resolutely for wisdom. For no real reason why should I suffer so much in hell. Therefore, having thought about this well, I should try to put these precepts into practice just as they have been explained in the doctor's instructions. If the doctor's instructions are not, how will a patient in need of cure be healed by his medicine? So this is the end of the 4th chapter. So if you are not mindful of, even if you may have seen the faults of negative emotions and so forth, and if you are not mindful of what you need to adopt in terms of practicing them and what you need to discard in terms of negative practices, I mean, if you're not able to be mindful and have this alertness or vigilance, I mean, you will not be able to help yourself with the practice. And therefore, by understanding what the negative consequences of the negative actions are and so forth, be mindful of them, and when you are about to indulge in negative action, you just restrain yourself and show always, with that mindfulness, you also show alertness to act according to wholesome action, the precepts of wholesome actions. And therefore, this fifth chapter, those who wish to guard their practice should very attentively guard their minds, for those who do not guard their minds will be unable to guard their practice. In this world, unsubdued and crazed elephants are incapable of causing such harms as the miseries of the deepest hell, which can be caused by the unleashed elephant of mind. So the faults, like negative emotions and so forth, come from our mind. Whereas the other qualities, the positive qualities also can be built from within the mind by seeing the advantage of developing them. And then as they increase, the power of these positive thoughts increase, the negative thoughts and emotions also will decrease. So that is shown by verse number 7. So on the basis of, in other words, on the basis of disciplined or undisciplined mind, we have suffering and happiness. And so with regard to the practice of patience, so of course we cannot get rid of, we cannot have a world free from things and people harming us. But although you may live within that kind of environment where there's full of harmful things that may harm you, if you could actually maintain your integrity so that you are not disturbed internally by the external factors, you'll be able to maintain your peace of mind. And therefore, this shows us not to let us be swayed by negative emotions, but being able to maintain your integrity. So it says, verse number 13 of this chapter, where would I possibly find enough leather with which to cover the surface of the earth? But wearing the leather just on the soles of my shoes is equivalent to covering the earth with it. Likewise, it is not possible for me to restrain the external course of things and so forth. So with regard to our mind,
so the classification of the mind can be usually the sensory and mental thoughts, but when it comes to the Tantra teaching, there are even more subtle classifications which are not very difficult, not very easy. And if one is able to understand about the empty nature of all the phenomena that appears before us in our day-to-day life, then we really understand the verse coming from Heart Sutra, that all the forms and the other aggregates are empty of intrinsic existence. And I think that this part of going for refuge seems to be missing from the Chinese and the other traditions. So therefore, so in Tibetan we have this addition of the verse, the special term of also the kyang. So therefore, this actually has the significance of expressing that not only the self is empty of intrinsic reality, but even the aggregates are empty of intrinsic existence. So when we designate a person, usually we have to take into mind first the aggregates, which are actually the basis of the designation of the person. So having understood the basis of the designation, which are the 5 aggregates, then we will be able to generate in our mind some notion of the self. So therefore, when you think about the 5 aggregates, which are the basis of the designation, then you will be able to get a clearer understanding of the selfness. So therefore, as the Aryadeva states in the 400 verses, that as long as we have the grasping for the physical aggregates, we will tend to have the grasping for the self. So therefore, if one is dispel the ignorance, which is the root of all the afflictions, then we will also understand the emptiness of both person and the phenomena. And also, as Nagarjuna says, that the form and the other physical aggregates is also merely a name, a title. So therefore, even the space is also merely a title or a name. So since there is not an intrinsic reality, intrinsic existence from the side of the form and the space, so therefore, the person, which is the quality that is being designated upon those aggregates, will not have any real existence. So since the 4 elements, which are the constituents and also the aggregates which form our human, the physical body, and since these causes, which are the elements, do not have any reality, presence or existence from their side, so how is it possible that the person, which is merely a title that is based on those elements, can have an intrinsic existence? So this verse by Nagarjuna is very strong. So sometimes when we think about that the things do not have an intrinsic reality, but it's merely a name, then sometimes you tend to have an attachment towards the title or the name. So therefore, when we say that even the title or the name itself do not have any existence, so then this is really very helpful. So therefore, the Tibetan term kyang, which is even the aggregates do not have any intrinsic reality, is very strong. So if we speak about the order of the teachings, first the Buddha taught about the selflessness of a person, and that too, the absence of the self as a substantial reality. And when we think about the existence of a solid self, that self as an owner or someone which controls the aggregates. So considering the self and the aggregates as 2 different things. So this kind of a self, which is different, considering the self as a different from its basis, is the grasping of the self. So the absence of this is actually the selflessness, which is not real, the subtle explanation of the selflessness, but it is a kind of a coarse explanation of the selflessness. Then in the second turning of the wheel of the Dharma by Lord Buddha, as Lord Buddha has taught in the first training of the will of the Dharma, Lord Buddha spoke about a lot of bases, such as phenomena with its own characteristics and intrinsic reality, and so on. But when it comes to the second will of the turning of the Dharma, then Lord Buddha taught that even those physical aggregates, which are the basis of the person and the self, do not have any intrinsic existence. So this is stated very clearly in the verses of the Heart Sutra. And if we contemplate clearly about this, then the four emptiness of the form is empty, and emptiness is also form, and form is not different from emptiness, and emptiness is not different from form. So this becomes very clear in our mind. And the two truths, as we discussed, since the form is not different from emptiness and emptiness is not different from form, this clearly tells us that the two truths are not different from each other. And this also clears or eliminates the true extremism, the grasping of the true extremism. If the things happen to have some intrinsic reality, then they cannot be depending upon external conditions. So since the things depend on other causes and conditions, that the causes bring its result and effect, so therefore these things, this concept and the things are possible only if they rely upon each other. So this becomes very clear when the teaching, when the Heart Sutra verse comes about, that the emptiness is also form. And if you take that instruction to yourself that I is empty, I'm empty, and emptiness is I or me, and I'm also not different from emptiness, and emptiness is not different from me. So if you take the basis as I or yourself, and when you try to find the essence of the I or the real I within you, then you won't be able to find anything. And the I is also formed by the aggregation of different causes and conditions together. And I, which is actually a point of reference of the self, and also the one that experiences the pleasant and unpleasant emotions, and so on, is all being designated and formed by different causes and conditions. So this verse from Heart Sutra, I think, is very important. And at the later part, there is another verse said that all the Buddhas of the past, present, and the future have also become enlightened, having relied upon the teaching of the emptiness. So all the Buddhas become enlightened, depending only about the emptiness. So if that is the case, then whether the Buddhahood can be attained in a mere second, it is not possible. So the verse again comes, the Gate, Gate, Paragate, which tell us about the progress of the 5 paths which are necessary to become enlightened. And my Chinese friends and also all the others recite the Heart Sutra every day. And Heart Sutra is the main text which presents the teachings on emptiness. And if you contemplate, about the teachings that is coming from Heart Sutra, that will be very effective. So therefore, wherever we we're on verse number 18. So verse number 16, the Novel of Reality has said that even if recitation and physical hardships are practiced for long periods of time, they will be meaningless if the mind is distracted elsewhere. Even those who wish to find happiness and overcome misery will wander with no aim nor meaning if they do not comprehend the secret of the mind, the paramount significance of Dharma. This being so, I shall hold and guard my mind well. Without the discipline of guarding the mind, what use are many other disciplines? Verse number 21, the third line reads that, or even in the midst of women, and His Holiness comments that when Shantideva composed the guide to the Bodhisattva's way of life, and as we have the history that he is known as the person with only 3 activities. And they really disregard him from the assembly of the Sanghas. And they also said that he is someone who brings the bad name to the community of the Sanghas. And when the monks have to recite orally the sutra, the Pratimoksha Sutra, so they make turn so that every monk has to take a turn to recite the Pratimoksha Sutra and the Shila Samyaga Sutra. At the time of the confession ceremony, which falls every 15th day of the month. So at one time, Shantideva's turn came to recite the sutra. Then at that time, Shantideva started that I do not have anything to say that has not been said before. And basically, we can even find in the Shantideva's text, even in the compendium of the training. So actually, Shantideva composed the compendium of the training first and the guide to the Bodhisattva's way later. So since this text is actually being taught to the community of Sangha, so it is taught to the monks, so therefore there is some words which is focused towards the women. For example, this third verse, or even in the midst of women, the steady effort to control myself will not decline. But later, when Shantideva also speaks about the negativities of to think about the women. And one of my friends said that he's not fond of Shantideva because he criticized the women and he did not pay respect to the women. So I think that it was due to the environment and the time at that time. So verse number 22, it is better to be without wealth, honor, body and livelihood, and it is better to let other virtues deteriorate rather than ever to let the mind decline. Verse number 23, O you who wish to guard your minds, I beseech you with folded hands, always exert yourself to guard mindfulness and alertness. People who are disturbed by sickness have no strength to do anything. Likewise, those whose minds are disturbed by confusion have no strength to do anything. Whatever has been learned, contemplated and meditated upon by those whose minds lack alertness, just like water in a leaking vase, will not be retained in their memory. Verse number 26, even those who have much learning, faith and willing perseverance will become defiled by a fall due to the mistake of lacking alertness. The thieves of unalertness in following upon the decline of mindfulness will steal even the merits I firmly gathered. I shall then proceed to lower realms. So for His Holiness comments that the external conditions for generating the mindfulness are presented by the following. And it is presented in the ornaments of the sutra by Maitreya about the 10 qualities of the masters that they are they follow the disciplines of the 3 trainings and so on. So here the master is not about how big or the grand their residence. In Tibet we have the custom that the lamas or the reincarnated lamas have a kind of authority to have huge residence. I think that Nagarjuna do not have any private residence. Even Chandrakriti do not have very huge ladrang or huge private residence. And this kind of the mistakes that we have in Tibet seems to be not only in Buddhist community, but even in other religious communities we can find. I think this is something to do with the authority of the land and the society. as I said yesterday, when fifth Dalai Lama took the responsibility of both the spiritual and the political, so then he started to have the palace, and so this tradition came into being. But then I really let go of all this, and that I completely resigned from the political responsibility, that not even for this Dalai Lama, but in future, if any Dalai Lamas arrive, so they will be only for the spiritual responsibilities. So this is why I took this decision. I happened to in one of the museums, and I also saw some brocades or some currencies, old currencies, and it was in one of the Western countries. And there was one monk in the monk's robe, and he was open mouth, and a lot of people are entering into his mouth. And the guide was a bit of hesitating when he comes at that time. And I told him that you do not need to hesitate. So this is true, that some monks really are against the development of the society. So they criticize and say that the religion or the teaching is actually to deceive the people. And from the point of the teaching itself, I explained yesterday that it is very profound teaching, for the teachings on compassion, bodhicitta, and the emptiness, and so on. If anyone who is intelligent or is a learned one will not have any wrong views or any wrong suggestions about the teachings of the Buddha. So I think it is the mistake of the person. So when we speak about the spiritual master, we have to think about the qualities that are being presented in the Vinaya text about the resident teacher, and also the Maitreya, also the 10 qualities from his text. And in Tantra also there are separate qualities, that too in the different classes of the Tantra. So all these texts present the separate qualities of the master, and also in the 50 stanzas also presents another series of the qualities of the master. So we have to be careful that we rely upon a spiritual master who possess these qualities. So even if you are not able to receive very extensive teachings from a master, for example, take the examples of Milarepa, he do not understand the extensive texts, but he was a very devoted student of Marba, who was the student of the Naropa, and having a very devoted student, and he practiced the essence of all the texts, though he did not study very extensive for many years. So that was enough for someone to practice and gain enlightenment. And Naropa was actually one of the gardens of the Nalanda University at that time. So he was a great master. So therefore, to summarize, it is very important to look for a spiritual master who has possessed all these spiritual qualities. And someone who can give a clear explanation. And Dhamma Rinpoche also says that a master has to be someone who is able to give clear explanation about the teachings. And when the teacher explains, someone has the teacher should be able to give a presentation which contains all the essence of the discourse, 300 volumes of the discourses and the commentary texts. And after giving the introduction of the Buddhism and all the teachings, finally it has to come to a point which will be very valuable and helpful to tame and transform one's mind. So this has to be the essence of any kind of teaching. And also a master should be someone who is able to give the teaching which is suitable and relevant to the mental disposition of the particular student. So verse number 30, through staying in the company of spiritual master, through the instructions of abbots and through fear. His Holiness comments that for the conditions, there are the external conditions and internal conditions. And the internal conditions is the third verse, which presents that the mindfulness will easily be generated in fortunate people who practice with respect. Verse number 31, I am ever dwelling in the presence of all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas who are always endowed with unobstructed vision. By thinking in this way, I shall mindfully develop a sense of shame, respect and fear. Also through doing this, recollection of the Buddha will repeatedly occur. When mindfulness is set with the purpose of guarding the doorway of the mind, then alertness will come about, and even that which had gone will return. His Holiness comments that one has to be mindful about to be very vigilant against whether our mind strays away and whether it engages or indulges in negative things or not. So we have to be always dependent upon the vigilance. Verse number 37, to check if there is any danger on the path, I should look again and again in the four directions. To rest, I should turn my head around and then look behind me. Having examined both ahead and behind, I should proceed to either come or go, being aware of the necessity. I should behave like this in all situations. Verse number 41, those who strive by all means of concentration. His Holiness comments that when it comes to the practice related to one's, from the point of one's one day, we have to be aware of what are the things that we have to be mindful of, things that we need to be restrained from, and things that we have to take into our practice. Continues the reading from verse number 42. His Holiness comments that when it comes to the generation of the concentration, it will be very clearly presented in the middle stages of the meditation, which we will read later. But if I am unable to do this when afraid of involved in celebrations, then I should relax. Likewise, it has been taught that at times of giving one may be indifferent to moral discipline. Verse number 44, by acting in this way all will be done well, by otherwise neither will be done. Likewise, there will be no increase in proximate disturbing conceptions that come from a lack of alertness. Verse number 47, whenever I have the desire to move my body or to say something, first of all I should examine my mind and then with steadiness act in the proper way. Whenever there is attachment in my mind and whenever there is the desire to be angry, I should not do anything nor say anything, but remain like a piece of wood. Whenever I have distracted thoughts, the wish to verbally belittle others, feelings of self-importance or self-satisfaction, when I have the intention to describe the faults of others, pretension and the thought to deceive others, whenever I am eager for praise or have the desire to blame others, whenever I have the wish to speak harshly and cause dispute, at such times I should remain like a piece of wood. Verse number 55, being very resolute and faithful, steady, respectful, polite, with the sense of shame, apprehensive and peaceful, I should strive to make others happy. I should not be disheartened by all the whims. His Holiness comments that those who bring harms to you, those who criticize you, we have to assume that this is actually an expression of his own negative emotions. So we have to be compassionate towards those person, but we should never be develop hatred towards those person, but rather find ways to tell him about that and to decrease his emotions. Verse number 57, the last one, like an apparition with no sense of self. So this is actually related to whatever kind of the attachment or anger arises within us. It is all related to the self. But when the compassion of the love arises, actually this kind of the positive thoughts are not derived or not arising out of the distorted mentation. Verse number 58, by thinking again and again that after a long time I have won the greatest leisure, likewise I should hold my mind as utterly unshakable as the king of mountains. Verse number 60, holding this body as mine, His Holiness comments that many of us are actually attached to our body, our food, our clothes, the houses. So these are all the facilities to survive this physical body. And therefore the Shantideva says here in the verse number 60 that holding this body as mine, in the verse number 59, if mind you are not made unhappy, why this body is dragged and tossed about by vultures greedy for flesh, then why are you so concerned about it now? Holding this body as mine, why mind do you gird it so, since you and it are separate? What use can it be to you? His Holiness comments that the body is actually a heap of all the uncontaminated things which are present within us. So with this, when we practice about the four mindfulness, so first the mindfulness of the body, then which is followed by the emotions, and ultimately the fourth mindfulness, which is the mindfulness of the mind. So in this way, when we look further about the designation of the self, if the person of the self is the continuity of the mind, then the continuity of the mind, as we discussed yesterday, is very difficult to locate it, because the continuity has to be in the mind stream of whether the present, the past, or the future. In this way, when you subject it to examination, you won't be able to even find a present mind, which is in the mode of abidance. So this kind of the grasping of the self as something solid or intrinsic presence is actually coming through our mistaken conception. So therefore we have to rely upon antidotes to dispel that. And so therefore Lord Buddha's teaching about on the Four Noble Truths is amazing. And Lord Buddha, soon after he became enlightened, he said that I have the teachings which is similar to nectar and which is clear light and so on. So if I present this teaching to anyone, there is no one who will understand my teaching. So it is common for all of us that we usually say that Lord Buddha attained enlightenment by meditating, staying in meditative equipoise. So on what topic was he in the meditation? Usually, no doubtly, is the emptiness. So having understood the emptiness, so emptiness here is presented by 5 qualities. So therefore, this kind of the very sacred teachings that he found, if I present it to anyone, no one is able to, no one is suitable to receive such teaching. So I think that is really relevant because at that time in India, it is not suitable to give a teaching which is based on selflessness. Some of my Indian friends, which are non-Buddhist, they told me that they have to meditate on the soul or the intrinsic self in the middle of your forehead, and you have to generate the calm abidance, the shamatha meditation. So therefore, all the Indian traditions seems to accept a certain kind of the presence of intrinsic self. And also their presentation about the nirvana or the liberation is that depend upon that one will become liberated or so. And Bishop Tutu, he is a great the priest in the Christian tradition. He is also the receiver of the Nobel Prize in peace. He is also very mischievous. Whenever we meet, we used to tease each other, and he told me that you are a Dalai Lama who does all kind of steps, and I told him that you are the one who does all kind of steps of a Christian. You are a Christian priest. He is a very senior and his health is not doing well. But considering very importance, he came to Dharamsala for a few days and we engaged in discussions. And since we are very friends, and he told me that since he, according to Christianity, he is ready to go to heaven after when he dies, but His Holiness will go to some other place when he passes away. So he is a very kind, and he is also very old and not doing well. And we all have to pray for his good health. So they all assert the presence of the soul, the concept of soul, and Lord Buddha, after becoming enlightened, at the time of even today, it was only the Lord Buddha himself who teaches about no self. So in a society we generally only accept the presence of a soul or the self, it was inappropriate or not suitable to give a teaching on no self. So therefore Lord Buddha, after becoming enlightened, he said that such a kind of a precious teaching, if I give to any audience, they won't be able to accept it. So I would like to hide it from the audience. So then after that, gradually when the students gathered and they request him to turn the wheel of Dharma, so Lord Buddha gave the first teaching on Four Noble Truths. So first on the nature of the Four Noble Truths, second about the action, and third the result. So this is the three phases of the teaching of the Four Noble Truths. And each Noble Truth is again being taught with 4 aspects, with totally 16 aspects. So which is wonderful teaching. And again, going back to the full mindfulness, where the mindfulness of the body is related to the truth of suffering, and the mindfulness of the emotion is to the origin, and so on. And ultimately, the mindfulness of the mind or consciousness is relevant to the practice, the teaching of the Fourth Noble Truth, which is the path. So in the second phase is where Lord Buddha taught about, first he taught about that we have to know the suffering and eliminate the origin and so on. And in the third, he said that, in the second, he spoke about the action. And in the third phase is that once you eliminate the suffering, you do not need to make effort to eliminate it once again. So these are the phases of the teachings that Lord Buddha gave pertaining to the Four Noble Truths. And this, in the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, it actually gives the teaching about the selflessness, the very subtle teachings on the selflessness. There's a verse, there's a word which actually presents that. especially the third phases of the teaching on Four Noble Truths, that when you know the suffering, you do not need to know it again, and so on. So this presents the teaching on no selflessness. And the first, for the suffering, truth of suffering, it is the impermanence, the suffering, empty, and no self. Then for the causes, conditions, and so on, for the origin. Then when it comes to the cessation, it comes to the ceasing, and so on. And for the origin of the suffering, the second truth, it speaks about the cause, the conditions, and so on. So this actually, when this teaching is given, we have to think about what are the causes of the sufferings and how the karma and afflicted emotions play the role in making us suffer. And having understood that the afflicted emotions is the origin. So, and it is a distorted conceptual mind. So therefore, we have to rely upon the antidote. Since it is a distorted mind which is against the reality, so automatically there will be another mind which is the antidote, or which perceives the opposite of what the afflicted emotions perceives. So therefore, when you contemplate in this way, you will come to the point that the truth of cessation is possible, because those afflicted emotions do have there is a possibility of a very potential antidote to the origins, which are the afflicted emotions. And when you cease the suffering and the origin of the sufferings, it is not on a temporary. So you have to rely on an antidote which has the potential or capacity to cease the suffering and the origin of suffering. So depending upon the antidote, and if you're able to cease the suffering, so you realize or you actualize the truth of cessation. So when you even get a small understanding about these cessations, you will find a real peace or satisfaction within you. So, and this cessation or the peace is not about certain temporary relief that you experience from taking medicines. This is a permanent relief or happiness. And for my case, of course, I do not have the real cessations, but a similar one that I have. And the fourth one, fourth qualities of the truth of cessations, so that it once you generate the cessation, so it stays forever within you, that you do not have to make effort for it to generate again. So now the fourth Noble Truth, which is the path, is again characterized by four features, which is the first, the path itself, and in the second, which is normally translated in Tibetan as Rigpa, is usually one without the double suffix sa and one with the double suffix sa. If it is the first case, it is usually meant for to cognized or something, to knowledge or something. But if it is a double suffix sa, then it means something valid or something. So any case, with the help of such a kind of the path, since this is the real antidote or the method through which we will be able to actualize the truth of cessation, it is also called the one that brings the actual cessation. And so Lord Buddha's teachings on the Four Noble Truths and the 16 aspects, and then after that the 37 factors of the enlightenment. So after that, when the students actually heard something about the no-self, then in the Vulture Speak, when Lord Buddha gave the teaching on the Prajnaparamita Sutra, in the Heart Sutra, Lord Buddha taught that all the phenomena do not have any traces of intrinsic presence. So this really gives a very clear indication about the nature of the phenomena, and also teach about the fundamentals of the basic and the path and the result. So to summarize, since things do not have to be empty of another separate emptiness, because they are empty of their own inherent existence. So this is a quote from the 20,000 Verses Sutra, that phenomena are not being absence of an external emptiness. So if that is the case, then the emptiness will not be the self-empty, rather it will be an others or empty of another factor. But when it comes to the Tantra teachings, when we speak about the form empty, which is again, which is not a negative phenomena, which is a positive phenomena, and when you think about the subjective clear mind, I think this concept of the emptiness or the form empty is actually the empty of other things. So the distinction between the self-empty or the empty of another factor, so this has to be very clear in our mind. So some traditions, so of course some scholars who are not very well aware of knowledge, do not have the complete knowledge, may misinterpret all this. Even in the Gelug traditions, there are chances that we will fall on one extremism, that without being conscious of the presence of the grasping within us, we are trying to look for an external obscurations. So without having a complete understanding, some people may misinterpret. I think the Khyentse Wangchuk and the Manduludu, which are actually the same students of one master, at the time they have different interpretations about the emptiness, whether the emptiness is a positive phenomena or negative phenomena. I think Khyentse Ombo, the scholar, says that the emptiness. So Khyentse Wangchuk speaks about the emptiness, which is the great still, as the positive. So since they are both the students of the same master, but their interpretations of the things may vary within one's own students. So this kind of the teachings, difference in one's own interpretations exist in all the teachings of the Sajja, Kagyu or any other traditions. In the Blazing of the Reasons by Baba Viveka, he has actually listed the views of all the Indian sub-schools, Indian non-Buddhist schools at that time. And when it comes to the presenting the middle ways views, he said that so mind-only school followers or the proponents are someone who go away from the Nagarjuna's teaching. So that was a bit too harsh. So if the Baba Viveka is somewhere here, so it is also the Asanga or the Vasubandhu. So Asanga himself is also being clearly stated by Buddha. So they are actually not so, he cannot be so harsh to them. So this actually tells us about that the great Indian scholars, they really examine and try to clarify the explanation. So at that time, such expressions are used. So for us, we have to first study the texts or the teachings coming from the Dzogchen, and also teachings coming from Sajja, and also the teachings of Gunchen, Jigme Ombo, and so on, and also the path and the results, the teachings, and also one's own texts, and also the texts of the Kagyu lineage and the Guru lineage, and so on. So having make oneself aware of all these teachings coming from the different lineage, then one can comment. So if you merely study only one text coming from one sect, And in Larim Chemo, we have the expressions that you take one grain and say that one barley grain and say that all the grains are like this. So this may not be possible. And also, as it is said that if something is being experimented or experienced by someone who is well versed in all the teachings, so all the teachings will actually come to one same explanation or intention. So therefore, if you put all the teachings into further investigation, they will all actually gathered or come to a common expressions, common intention. So here it speaks about the mindfulness of the body. It's verse number 62. First of all, mentally separate the layers of skin, and then with the scalpel of discrimination, separate the flesh from the skeletal frame. And having split open even the bones, look right down into the marrow. While examine this, ask yourself, where is its essence? If even when searching with such effort, you can apprehend no essence, then why with so much attachment are you still guarding this body now? What use is this body to you if its dirty insides are unfit for you to eat, if its blood is not fit to drink, and if its intestines are not fit to be sucked? Verse number 69, and having paid my body its wages, I shall engage it in making my life meaningful. But if my body is of no benefit, then I shall not give it anything. I think we won't be able to finish this. Verse number 70, I should conceive of my body as a boat, a mere support for coming and going, and in order to benefit all others, transform it into a wish-fulfilling body. And His Holiness comments that with the teachings and the practice of the mind training, so we have to walk towards making all the obstacles into our own path. Verse number 71 reads, now while there is freedom to act, I should always present a smiling face and cease to frown and look angry. I should be a friend and counsel of the world. I should desist from inconsiderably and noisily moving around chairs and so forth, as well as from violently opening doors. I should always delight in humility. So we stop in verse number 73. The dedication verse.